I used to think the cruelest betrayal would come from strangers, but I was wrong. It came from the boy I raised with trembling hands and sleepless nights, the one I gave my youth for. And it started on a Christmas Eve when he held my hand and whispered a prayer I'll never forget. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the moment I said yes to letting him back into my home, into my life. My name is Margaret Wilson. I'm 68 years old. 5 years ago, I buried the only man who ever truly saw me. Richard was my husband of 43 years, quiet, steady, kind. The kind of man who never raised his voice, who left love notes tucked into cereal boxes, who fixed the squeaky stair even though it reminded us of our son sneaking in late. After he passed, the silence in this house was unbearable. 3 bedrooms, a porch we built together, a kitchen with his silly world's okayest cook mug still sitting untouched. When you're used to sharing a life, the echo of your own breath feels like mockery. So when my son, Thomas, called and said, "Mom, why don't Christine and I move in with you? You shouldn't be alone," I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in years. I said yes before he finished the sentence. They moved in by October. Thomas, his wife Christine, and their 2 teenagers, Lily and Ben. The house, which had been still for so long, came alive again. Doors opening, dishes clinking, footsteps on the stairs. I gave them the master bedroom. Young people need the space, I told myself. I moved into the smallest room at the back of the house, my old sewing room. It smelled like cedar and dust, and I had to squeeze my dresser against the wall, but I didn't mind. It was worth it to have laughter in the hallway again. The first few weeks, Christine was polite. Not warm, but polite. She insisted on cooking most nights, something she said made her feel in control. I stepped aside. After all, I'd cooked for decades. I didn't need to compete. Thomas was busy with work. He'd kiss me on the cheek in the mornings, say, "Thanks, Mom," when I folded his laundry or ironed his shirts. Those little things felt like validation. I thought, this is how we heal. This is how we become a family again. I started waking up earlier, making coffee for everyone before they stirred. I kept my voice soft so I wouldn't wake the kids. I even began baking again. Banana bread, cranberry muffins, cinnamon rolls like I used to make for Thomas when he was little. He didn't mention them. Christine did once. "That smells like a sugar bomb, Margaret. Ben's watching his carbs." I laughed it off. She didn't mean anything, probably just being health conscious. I told myself that a little sacrifice was part of sharing a home, but slowly, my place in this house began to shift, from mother to background noise. The decorations were the first to go. Boxes of old ornaments, some of them handmade, some picked up at tiny gas stations during road trips with Richard, got moved to the attic. Christine brought in silver and gold modern decor. "It's more contemporary," she said, brushing off the old pine wreath I'd hung on the door every year since 1982. Thomas didn't say anything. I swallowed my hurt and nodded. "It's just decorations," I told myself. "What matters is we're together." One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen while Christine was on the phone. She didn't hear me at first. I caught the tail end of her sentence. "I know she means well, but having her here is like living in a museum. The smell of old perfume and regret." She looked startled when she turned and saw me. "Oh, Margaret, didn't hear you come in. Want some tea?" I said yes, not because I wanted tea, but because I didn't know what else to say. There's a moment. Every mother knows it, when something in your chest folds in on itself. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's the quiet realization that maybe your place in their world is fading. But I held on because I believed in family, because I believed, despite the little cracks, that Thomas loved me. One night, Thomas knocked on my door. He sat on the edge of my bed like he used to when he had bad dreams as a child. He didn't say much, just, "Work's been tough. Money's tight. Thanks for everything, Mom." He hugged me. I remember thinking, he still sees me. I'm still his mother. I didn't know then what he was planning. I didn't know that this wasn't a hug of love, but a hug of guilt. Sometimes I wonder if that was the moment I should have asked more questions. But hindsight always arrives dressed like wisdom. At the time, it just looked like love. I'd always watched revenge story films with Richard, those quiet ones where the heroine doesn't scream or plot bloody revenge, but simply walks away, stronger. Back then, I thought they were just fiction. I didn't know one day I'd become that woman. That winter, the wind howled through the shutters. I wrapped myself in Richard's old flannel and made cinnamon rolls on Christmas Eve, just like always. The dough stuck to my fingers, my hands shook a little, but I smiled, because this would be our first real Christmas together again in years. Little did I know it would also be the last, and it would begin the story of how I lost everything and found myself. Christmas Eve had always meant something in our house. Growing up, Thomas would help his father decorate the mantle. We had our little traditions, spreading cinnamon-scented pine cones around the fireplace, setting up the nativity scene in the same corner for 40 years, carefully placing the angel on top of the tree. Richard used to lead the Christmas prayer. His voice, calm, steady, made the house feel like a chapel, even just for a few moments. This year it was Thomas. We were all gathered around the table. The roast was still steaming, the cranberry sauce glistened, and I'd even found the old candlesticks from our 25th anniversary. I placed them quietly before dinner, hoping someone would notice. No one did. Christine had cooked. Her food was lovely, though sterile, like something off a magazine page. The kids, Lily and Ben, were glued to their phones, thumbs tapping away, as if nothing sacred was happening. Still, I was grateful. For the noise, for the company, for the flicker of what family used to be. "Let's pray," Thomas said, clearing his throat. We bowed our heads, hands linked around the table. I reached for Thomas's hand. He took mine, firmly. Stronger than necessary, almost as if he were testing my grip. His palm was warm, but his fingers, strangely, trembled. He began to pray, something about gratitude, about blessings. His voice was uncertain, unlike his father's. I closed my eyes and let the memories of Richard's voice guide me instead. And then, a whisper. So close I felt the breath against my ear. "God must have forgotten to take you." My eyes snapped open. Thomas didn't flinch. He didn't turn. He continued the prayer like nothing had happened, but he had leaned in. He had said it. And I knew. He wanted me gone. He didn't say it to Christine. He said it to me, with intention, with clarity. And what chilled me most wasn't the words themselves. It was the way he squeezed my hand after, not in comfort, but in warning. A silent, "Don't you dare speak." Have you ever felt your heart drop, but not shatter? It just froze. Mid-beat, like the moment your trust finally dies. Quietly. I stayed silent. I finished the prayer. I wiped my eyes under the table with a napkin. When dinner was served, I smiled. I passed the potatoes. I complimented Christine's stuffing, not because I meant it, but because I didn't want to explode. Because if I exploded, I would lose what little I had left. Later that night, in the tiny room they gave me, the one I used to sew curtains in, I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching a photo of Richard. I wanted to scream into the darkness. I wanted to call him back from wherever he was. I whispered, "Did you see what our son has become?" But silence answered me. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake listening to Thomas and Christine laugh downstairs, their voices muffled but carefree. Maybe they thought I didn't hear. Maybe they didn't care. What I knew, deep in my bones, was that something had shifted, and I would never be the same. I know this may sound strange to some of you watching, but I want to ask, honestly, have you ever heard your child say something that broke your heart in a way words can't describe? If you have, leave me a comment. You don't have to share every detail. Just say, "I know the feeling," because I think some of us have felt that cold, silent break too. The next morning, I made pancakes for the kids. Christine told me, politely, that they'd already eaten protein bars. Thomas didn't look at me when he left for work. No one said thank you. 2 days later, I went into the hallway closet to pull out the photo albums for New Year's. They were gone. I asked Christine. She said, "Oh, I thought we could simplify the space. Everything's in the attic." She smiled. That thin, sugary smile that never reached her eyes. Then came the medication. I'd been feeling foggy, forgetful, losing track of time. One night, I realized I'd taken 2 pills, thinking it was just one. But something didn't feel right. I checked the bottle. It wasn't the dosage Dr. Patel had prescribed. I hadn't changed it. I never would. But someone had. That same week, I overheard Christine on the phone again. She was in the kitchen. I was in the hallway. The heater vent carried her voice like an uninvited truth. March is perfect. Sunset Valley has a room open. We'll get a great price for the house by spring. Pause. Thomas is still nervous, but he's coming around. Once she's out, we can renovate everything. She won't need it where she's going. I stood there frozen. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were trying to make it happen, or at the very least, make it easier to erase me. That's when I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't frustration. This wasn't just Christine. It was my son. My son wanted me gone. That realization? It didn't come like thunder. It came like snowfall, soft, steady, silent. But suddenly, the entire world was buried under it. I didn't cry. Not then. I walked back to my room. I sat down, and I looked in the mirror, not at my wrinkles, not at my white hair, not even at the sag in my shoulders. I looked into my own eyes. And for the first time in years, I asked myself, what are you going to do, Margaret? It started with my mail. I noticed a letter from the bank had gone missing. At first, I thought maybe I'd misplaced it. I've been known to leave things between pages of cookbooks or inside the freezer, of all places. But then it happened again. A statement I knew had come, vanished. One morning, I walked into the kitchen just in time to see Christine tucking something into the drawer too fast. She smiled. "Oh, morning, Margaret. You scared me. Just cleaning up some junk mail. Nothing important." I smiled back, but something inside me said, yes, it was. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. I had the smallest room. My baking trays were shoved to the back of the cabinets. Even my rocking chair had been pushed out to the garage to make space in the living room. It was like I was being gently erased. Not all at once. Just little by little. You know that feeling? Like you're watching someone paint over your name, layer by layer, until there's nothing left but a blank wall. I kept trying to tell myself I was overthinking it, but then came the moment that took that excuse away. One afternoon, Christine left to run errands. Thomas was upstairs. I walked by their bedroom door, and something stopped me. I know. A mother shouldn't snoop, but that voice in me, the one that knew something was wrong, was louder than my manners. I walked in. I opened her closet, pushed aside her mountain of designer shoes, and that's where I found it. A blue folder labeled Margaret Dompisiat. Inside, my missing power of attorney papers signed but undated, a draft letter to my doctor claiming I was showing signs of dementia, a list of incidents, leaving the stove on, false, wandering outside in my nightgown, never happened, forgetting Thomas's birthday. His birthday's in August. I made him his favorite lemon pie this year. But that wasn't all. There were financial statements from my accounts, printouts from Sunset Valley Nursing Home. One note read, "Spring market equals best time to sell. Agent says up to $530K. I sat down on the floor, folder in my lap, and for the first time in weeks, I let it all in. Not just the facts, the truth. They weren't just thinking about moving me. They weren't concerned about my well-being. They were planning, strategizing, packaging my entire life into a profitable transaction, and the one leading it all was my son. It's a strange thing. To realize the child you raised might sell you off like furniture. He used to cry when I left him at preschool. Now he was ready to ship me away for a down payment and some debt relief. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, the one Christine always said I didn't know how to use, and photographed every page. Click, click, click. Then I placed everything back exactly as I found it. Let them think I was still clueless. It was better that way, for now. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, cradling the phone in my lap like it was the last thread connecting me to myself, and I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Martha?" I said when she answered. Her voice was warm, familiar. "Maggie, you okay?" I swallowed. "No," I said, "but I will be. Can you come tomorrow morning while they're out? Say no more. I'll be there at 10. I slept in my clothes that night. Didn't bother brushing my hair, didn't wash the dishes. For once, I let the house go, because for the first time I realized it's not my house anymore. Richard and I built that home together, brick by brick. He fixed the porch swing. I chose the curtains. We painted every wall ourselves, and now my own son wanted to sign it away, erase my name from the deed, and tuck me away where no one would see me again. The next morning, after Thomas and Christine left, I pulled out the small hat box from the back of my closet. Inside, buried beneath old birthday cards and love notes, was the key Richard had given me to a safe deposit box we'd opened years ago. "Just in case," he'd said, "the world isn't always kind to good people." He always had a way of seeing the storm before it hit. Then I made a second call. "Edward," I said when he picked up, "it's Margaret Wilson. I need your help, and this time it's serious." "Margaret," he said softly, "what's going on?" "My son and his wife are trying to put me away and take my home," I replied, voice steady. There was a pause. "Tell me everything," he said. By the time Martha arrived at 10 a.m. sharp, I had the kettle on, the documents spread out, and my plan just beginning to take shape. She sat beside me, eyes widening as she read. "Maggie," she whispered, This is criminal." "I know," I said, and for the first time in weeks, I meant it. "I know what's happening to me, and I'm not going to let it." Funny how betrayal doesn't always shout. Sometimes it walks in wearing your son's cologne and says, "Morning, Mom," with a smile. But I'd seen through the smile now, and soon, so would they. That morning, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual, not because I was fixing my hair or checking for wrinkles. Those I'd already made peace with. No, I stood there because for the first time in years, I saw someone I hadn't seen in a long while. A woman who had raised a son with her bare hands, who had budgeted every grocery bill, who'd worked late nights at the diner to keep him in school, who stayed quiet during the wars inside the house just to keep peace for his sake. She looked back at me now with eyes that were tired, but no longer confused. "I see you," I whispered to the mirror, and I meant it. The last few days had stripped something off of me, not youth, not pride. Illusions. The illusion that if you love someone hard enough, they'll never turn on you. The illusion that blood means loyalty. The illusion that kindness protects you. No. Sometimes kindness is the bait, and silence is how they close the trap. But not this time. Not with me. Edward met me at his office the next afternoon. It was a small place. Nothing flashy, just rows of oak shelves, a desk full of paper stacks, and the scent of old books and coffee. He poured me a cup without asking. He always remembered I liked it black. "I've reviewed the photos you sent," he said, adjusting his glasses, "and I've contacted Dr. Patel's office. Christine's been picking up your medication for months." "I never asked her to," I said flatly. "She requested higher dosages than prescribed. That's tampering, Margaret. And if it caused you harm, we're looking at serious consequences." I stared into my coffee, quiet. "I don't want to put them in jail," I finally said. "I just want them out of my home. I want my name back on my own life." Edward nodded. "We'll start there." Back home, I smiled more than usual. I shuffled around the kitchen slowly, like I was still foggy. I asked Christine to remind me which drawer the forks were in. I wrote trash day on the calendar in shaky handwriting, then took it out like clockwork at 6 a.m. Let them believe I was still losing it. Let them believe they had more time. While they rehearsed their victory, I was rewriting the ending. Martha visited often. She brought cookies, gossip from town, and a sense of normal I hadn't realized I missed so deeply. "You don't have to go through this alone," she said, gently squeezing my hand. Too late for a loan, I replied, with a half smile, but not too late to wake up. Edward called again later that week. There's something else you should know. My heart tightened. Christine's financials are unusual, he said carefully. Her past includes 2 marriages, both ending after large settlements in her favor. She's done this before, Margaret. She finds someone vulnerable, moves in, then strips them of everything. I let that sink in. So I wasn't even the real target, I said. Just a piece of land on her next board game. I'm sorry, Edward said softly. I wasn't. I was grateful. Because now I saw the game clearly. And I started preparing quietly. I hid my true medication in an old spy novel Richard gave me. I stopped taking the tampered pills, and my mind grew sharper with each passing day. I bought a small recording device. Nothing fancy, just something that could catch voices at the dinner table. And most importantly, I waited. Waited for them to try and talk to me. Waited for them to finally say it to my face. That I was no longer needed. No longer competent, no longer wanted. It's funny how they never suspect you when you move slow, when your hands tremble, when you forget names on purpose. I started writing again. Little journal entries, not for court, for me. One entry read, "They think I'm crumbling, but I'm just rearranging my pieces." Another, "I don't want revenge, I want release." The night before the planned family dinner, I stood in the backyard watching the porch lights flicker. Christine had strung new lights last week, sleek and white, minimalist, she called them. But I missed the old yellow bulbs Richard had strung by hand, even if they blinked unpredictably. Those lights had been imperfect, but they were ours. Now, even the glow of the house felt like it belonged to someone else, but that was about to change. You know, people talk about rising from the ashes like it's dramatic, like fire and smoke and fury. But sometimes, rising looks like this. A quiet woman, putting on her best sweater, tucking pearls into her ears, smoothing back her hair, and walking into her kitchen like she owns the place again. Because she does. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't rehearse a speech. I just sat at the table, looking out the window, tea in hand, waiting for the ones who thought I was asleep to walk into the room where I was finally wide awake. I started waking up earlier than usual, not to bake, not to serve coffee, not to fuss over laundry, but to listen. At 5 a.m., the house is like a confession box. Every sound means something. The way Christine closes drawers too carefully, the way Thomas tiptoes past my door like he doesn't want me to know he's still awake. They think I'm still foggy, still tired, still under their spell. Let them. The truth was, I had never been more awake in my life. I kept a small notebook hidden behind the bookshelf. I labeled it Observations. Tuesday. Christine took a call from someone named Brad. She whispered, if this works out, I'll have the funds by April. Wednesday. Thomas accidentally dropped a real estate flyer near my purse. Sunset Valley, again. Thursday. Christine threw out my old slippers, said they were falling apart. She never asked. Just tossed them, like I wouldn't notice, like I didn't matter. That week, I pretended to forget Martha's name. I looked her straight in the eyes and called her Miriam. The next day, I left the oven on. Not really. I just told Christine I might have. She raised an eyebrow, said, "That's not safe, Margaret." I nodded, said, "You're right, I'm getting worse, huh?" She smiled, and that smile told me everything. She thought the plan was working, perfect. What they didn't know was I'd replaced the tampered medication with the correct dosage. I'd started keeping voice memos on my phone. I had a tiny recording device clipped under the dining table. And Edward, my lawyer, had everything backed up, including the scanned letter to my doctor with forged incidents, including Christine's past divorce records and settlements, including the fact that Thomas had racked up nearly $80,000 in high-interest debt tied to Christine's lifestyle. Edward said something during our last meeting that stuck with me. You don't have to burn them down, you just have to let them walk into the fire they build. So I waited. Christine began planning a family dinner the following Friday. "I think we should talk about some options for your future, Margaret," she said one afternoon while slicing cucumbers in perfect, soulless circles. "It's just, things are getting harder for you. We've noticed." I nodded gently, like a toddler being scolded. "I appreciate that," I whispered. She took the bait. Martha helped me prepare that day. She brought over the royal blue dress Richard always loved. It still fit, barely, but it did. We styled my hair. She dusted my pearl earrings. She looked at me in the mirror and said, "You're ready?" "I'm not angry anymore," I told her. "I'm something else." "What?" she asked. "Clear." At 6 sharp, I walked down the stairs. The smell of roast chicken filled the air. Christine wore her usual beige. Thomas had on his collared shirt, probably to look respectable. But I walked in like I owned the place, because I did. "Margaret," Christine said, surprised. "Don't you look lovely, all dressed up?" "I thought I should look nice if we're discussing my removal from the house," I said casually. She blinked. Thomas cleared his throat. "Mom, let's just eat first, okay?" I took my place, not at the end of the table like usual, but at the head, where Richard used to sit. They noticed. Neither of them said a word. Dinner was a blur of fake smiles and forced conversation. Then came dessert. Christine cleared her throat. "Margaret, we've been doing a lot of thinking, and we feel that it might be time to consider professional care. Sunset Valley has an excellent reputation." Thomas added, "It would just be temporary, Mom, for your safety. The house is big. We'd manage it for now. Take the burden off your shoulders." I set my fork down. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. I slid it across the table. "What's this?" Thomas asked. "Test results," I said softly. "Edward ran them. Turns out I've been on double the dosage of my medication. That explains the confusion." Christine went pale. "That's ridiculous," she said. "You're clearly—" "Clear?" I interrupted. "Yes, I am now." Thomas flipped through the documents. His hands trembled. "Did you do this?" he asked Christine. She laughed nervously. "Of course not. She's confused again, Thomas. This is what we've been dealing with." "Also," I continued, "Edward has the full recordings of our dinner conversations, including the one where you both discussed the home's estimated market value and which week would be best to get me relocated." Christine stood. "You're spying on us?" "No," I said, standing slowly. "I'm protecting myself. Something I should have done the moment I gave up my room, my kitchen, my name on this house, for the sake of feeling needed." Thomas looked like a man watching his own soul slip away. I didn't want this, Mom," he stammered. "Christine said it was the only way. We were drowning in debt. I thought you seemed so—" "Old?" I asked. "Disposable?" He said nothing. I walked around the table and gently touched his shoulder. "I raised you better than this, Thomas, but I also taught you that consequences don't disappear just because you regret them." He nodded, eyes full of shame. "I want you both out," I said evenly. "Tonight." Christine laughed bitterly. "You can't just kick us out. We have nowhere to go." "You had somewhere to go before you tried to erase me," I replied. "Now you'll have to figure it out again." Thomas packed first. Christine slammed doors, muttered curses under her breath, and made promises she wouldn't keep. I stood at the door, steady, silent. They left. I closed the door, locked it, and just stood there listening to the quiet. It wasn't empty anymore. It was mine again. The house was quiet again. But this time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt calm. Like something sacred had returned, like the walls themselves were breathing easier now that they weren't holding secrets anymore. After Thomas and Christine left, I didn't cry, not at first. I cleaned the dishes, I wiped down the table, I put the good china back in the cabinet just the way Richard used to like it. Then I sat by the window in my old rocking chair, and I let the silence settle around me. Not like a burden this time, but like a blanket. One I chose. The next morning, I made coffee, just for me. Strong, black, hot. I stood on the back porch looking out at the dogwood tree Richard had planted on our 10th anniversary. Its branches were still bare. It was early spring, but tiny buds had begun to show. Quiet, hopeful, waiting. Much like me. Martha stayed with me for a few nights. She brought over soup, new curtains, and the laugh I had missed more than I realized. Together, we returned the furniture to the way it used to be, took down Christine's wall art, found the old photo albums in the attic, and dusted them off. "It's like an exorcism," she joked as we tossed out a box of Sunset Valley brochures. I laughed. It wasn't dramatic laughter, just the kind that comes from deep relief. Edward wrapped up the legal matters quickly. Christine didn't contest anything, not when she saw the evidence we had. Thomas signed a separation of estate agreement and moved into a small apartment across town. I never pressed charges, not because they didn't deserve it, but because I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace, and I had it now. In the weeks that followed, the house became mine again. Not just in paperwork, but in soul. I baked again, not for anyone else, just for the smell of cinnamon in the air. I repainted the kitchen, a soft sage green. I planted tulips with Harriet next door. We shared coffee and watched birds return in the mornings. And one Sunday afternoon, I went through a box I'd been avoiding. Richard's old letters. One read, "If something ever happens to me and you feel alone, remember, you built this life too. You weren't just beside me. You were with me, always." I folded the letter and pressed it to my chest. And then, the letter came. From Thomas. Not a text, not an email. A handwritten letter. I sat with it for 3 days before opening it. It was short, no excuses, no drama. Just this. "Mom, I don't know how I let it get this far. I failed you. I see that now. Christine is gone. The debt is mine to carry. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just the chance to earn your respect again. I hope one day we can talk." I read it 3 times, and I cried. Not from pain this time, but from release, because something in me softened. Not completely, but enough to say, maybe there's still something left to rebuild, different, smaller, but real. We met 2 weeks later, a little cafe downtown. He looked thinner, paler, older. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. "Hi, Thomas." We talked for nearly 2 hours, not about the betrayal, that had been said in silence, but about who he had been and who he wanted to be now. He didn't ask to move back, didn't ask for money. He just asked, "Can I visit next Sunday?" I nodded. "Yes, but bring nothing. Not guilt, not apology, just yourself." And that's how it began. Sundays became quiet visits. He helped fix the shed, trim the hedges, brought over a box of old board games. We never talked about Christmas. We never mentioned Sunset Valley. But we laughed again. Carefully, like people rebuilding something with shaky hands. Not a mother and son returned to the past, but 2 people, choosing to walk forward, one small step at a time. On the anniversary of Richard's passing, Thomas joined me at the cemetery. We stood in silence. He placed a small bundle of rosemary on the stone, Richard's favorite herb. He whispered, "Dad would have been proud of you." I replied, "He would have expected nothing less." And in that moment, I didn't feel erased anymore. I felt real, rooted, unmoved. The world didn't cheer for me. There were no headlines, no applause. But in the garden outside my kitchen, the tulips bloomed brighter that year, and inside me, something soft and strong said, "You are not just someone's mother, you are someone." If you've ever had to reclaim your place in your own life, if someone ever tried to erase your worth, but you stood back up quietly, I'd love to hear your story. You don't have to tell it all. Just tell me this. What moment made you finally say, enough? Leave a comment. I'll be reading them, every one, because sometimes the softest victories are the ones that matter most.